just want to welcome you to this discussion on internet crimes against children. Today we have Ms. Walka, who's from the Ohio Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force, and she is going to be talking about what something we think is very essential is to recognize the topics about internet safety and internet crimes against children. It's ever changing. It's always good to stay up to date on those issues within our community and outside of our community. I would like to say thank you to the parents and families for coming today, and I would also like to thank the Elyria City officials and Elyria City district officials that are here, and our school administrators who have come and support us here. Without anything else, I want to welcome Ms. Walka, whose insights will shed light on the challenges we face and guide us towards a safer online environment. And to let you know, we are going to be taping this, so we will have a copy of this as well if you would like to have it as well to share out.
I tend to wander a little bit, so if you see me kind of pacing back and forth, that's totally normal. But thank you all so much for coming. I really appreciate it. I know our lives are super busy, but I mean, I have a biased viewpoint on this. I think this is a super important topic, and obviously you guys all agree because you're here to listen to it. But my name is Emily Welka. I am the Public Outreach Coordinator for the Ohio Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force. I've been with ICAC for about 2 years now, and what I do are strictly presentations. So I've presented to grades K through 12. I've talked to parents, sexual assault response teams, forensic nurses, and so on. Before we get into this presentation, it's going to start off with a quick video. Funny enough, I found this video on Instagram of all places, but for me it just really highlights what the real danger is in terms of the internet. We all have our preconceived notions of what internet predators look like, how they operate online, like what they're doing, their different nefarious deeds. But this video I'm about to show you kind of brings to light what we see on a daily basis, especially.
When I was just starting out, it was harder. You really had to keep things hush-hush. But then the internet came along and everything changed. Now we hide in plain sight and share all kinds of things. We review, rate, make recommendations, just like anything else out there. Pre-internet, you know how hard it was to pretend to be a 9-year-old girl? Now I just roll up looking like their BFF. And the best part? The only people who could stop me pretend I don't exist. You ask me, there's never been a better time to be a monster.
Alright, so like I said before, that video really just sheds light on our types of offenders that we see in internet crimes against children. Like we all have our preconceived ideas that they are people that live in their parents' basement, may never see the light of day, or on their computers all the time. But that's not always the case. We've arrested prominent members of communities, teachers, people who are around kids day in and day out for their jobs. So it just goes to show you how powerful of a tool the internet is. And at the end of the day, it is essentially just a tool. It's not good, it's not bad, it's just how you use it. Along with this, I want to show you just the issue it is in the state of Ohio. So what these numbers represent are our cyber tip line reports. So we work very closely with the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, and how they kind of play into our cases is that every electronic service provider or internet platform, application, so on, is legally obligated to report instances of child exploitation. This could be something such as cyberbullying, it could be enticement, it could be, sending nude images between two accounts, anything like that that has to do with online exploitation. The National Center will receive those reports from those different apps. So these are the number of reports that we've received from NECMEC from 2015 up until last year. So in 2015, we got about 3,000 of these reports. And that was because for us, our main social media platform was really just Facebook. Now when we ask kids if they're on Facebook, they kind of give us a weird look because they tell us it's for old people. Their words, not mine. I have a Facebook, I promise. But that was really our main, social media platform that we were the most concerned about. Now as time goes on, obviously these tips are continuing to jump, and we saw our largest increase from 2022 to 23. And this number is actually slightly off. We received about 21,595 tips last year. So a huge increase from what we saw in 22, about 17,000 up until last year. The reason for this there's several different ones. The first is that there's more apps that kids can use. Back in 2015 it was Facebook, but now we have Snapchat, Instagram, TikTok, and so on. Another reason why these tips continue to increase is because more people are reporting it. More parents are able to, recognize the signs of something nefarious happening on their child's device. They're going on the NCMEC cyber tip line report system and they're putting it in there. Even kids themselves are more likely to report it now versus in the early 2010s. So several different reasons why these numbers continue to rise, but for us, we just continue to see a jump in specifically internet crimes against children. So a little more background on our task force specifically. If you've never heard about us before, that's okay. We're one of those larger task force that seems to fly under the radar for a lot of people. But we're one of 61 task force across the entire country. We technically fall within the top 5 in terms of size year in and year out. The only ones above us are usually like New York, Chicago, some of the ICACs on the West Coast, and so on. But these are the 3 main reasons as to why we were created. The number one is that the DOJ realized that more kids and teens were going to be online, whether it was for school like we saw during the pandemic, or just because, technology is fun, more kids want to be connected and so on. The second is that more illegal material is able to be circulated online compared to before the internet existed. The same way that we connect with, loved ones, people we care about, coworkers and so on, our offenders are finding new ways to connect with other online offenders or to then connect with kids. And then lastly, more adults are seeking unsupervised contact with kids and teens. In the days before the internet, we were all taught about like the shady white van. Like, don't go off with the guy that's, giving out candy from his car and so on. Now, for our offenders, it's a lot easier for them to sit at home, log into Instagram, and converse with kids that way. So with this job and with these cases, there's this preconceived idea that it couldn't possibly happen on things that our kids use every single day. And I'm here to tell you that is as far from the truth as you could get. So our cyber tips only come from the ClearNet. And the ClearNet consists of things that we use all the time. So things such as Google or Facebook, Snapchat, Instagram, and so on. So all of our cyber tips come from those sort of platforms. We do very, very minimal dark web investigations. Probably 99% of what we investigate every day comes from things that you and your kids may use all the time. So these are the electronic service providers from 22, and the company that we got the most cyber tips from was Google. So this is Google Drive, Google Photos, Google accounts in general. But Google also owns YouTube, so all of those YouTube cyber tips also fall under this category. Underneath that, we have Snapchat, Facebook, Synchronos, Microsoft, and so on. So this just goes to show you that there isn't really a safe space online. Like we tell our kids, stay off this website, it's not safe, but this one is okay. And that's not necessarily true. Any app or any website that allows you to communicate with another person, wherever they are in the world, that app or that website has the potential to be exploited in terms of internet crimes against children. So with these numbers, my goal is not to rank these in terms of which one's worse, which one's better, and so on. We all know that human trafficking is a serious issue in Ohio. I'm not going to debate that. I'm not going to lower it in terms of internet crimes, but I do want to show you how the numbers stack up. So in 21, the National Human Trafficking Hotline received slightly over 1,000 human trafficking tips. 232 of those tips involve sex trafficking, And 72 of those total tip number involved minor children, so kids under the age of 18. In 21, so the same year for our task force, we received 35 child sex trafficking cyber tips. That was 0.3% of our total tip load for 21. 680 of our tips involved enticement tips, so that is essentially when an adult poses online either as themselves or someone else, and they essentially try to get a child to meet up with them for sex. So we got 680 of those tips. The bulk of our cyber tips come from the exchange of child exploitation material. So kids under the age of 18 pictured in a nude state. And that was about 11,000 of our tips, so 87%. So like I said, I'm not going to debate which is better, which is worse, which is more of a problem. I just want to show you the raw numbers of where your child is more likely to be exploited. If they have a device that they're able to connect to the internet, connect with other people, have these conversations, exchange media, there is a much higher chance that they're going to be exploited via that avenue than in terms of human trafficking. So our cyber tips tend to break up into 4 categories. The lowest category, that is financial. However, this number is continuing to climb every single year. So if you've heard about sextortion, that sort of crime, that would fall under the financial category, and we'll get into that a little later. But outside of that, there's explicit conversation and role play, enticement, like I described before, that would fall under the sex category. But the largest category we see every day is content, whether it's adults who are creating content by abusing kids, minors who are sending their own created content to other minors, other adults, and so on. That is what we see the majority of all the time. So the biggest question I get in terms of what parents want to know is usually social media. So I found this really interesting study out of Chicago where doctors essentially wanted to get a feel on what was the concern with social media. Like, we all know that kids love to use it, but what is the parent take on it? And what they noticed were 2 areas of concern. The first was what it was taking away from their child, whether it was face-to-face interaction, time away from their schoolwork, time away from, hanging out with family and so on. And the second is what it provided their kids. And it was usually in terms of what they were exposed to. So hate speech, bullying, and so on. And there was a much larger concern with parents over what was taken away versus what their child was exposed to. So the top 3 things that parents cited in terms of what it was taking away was not enough sleep, not enough physical activity, and not enough focus on schoolwork. And those kind of all ranked within the same percentile. But in terms of inappropriate behavior, what 51% of parents agreed that their kids were being exposed to was content that is too sexual. And in terms of what we see all the time, this does add up. We see a lot more of younger kids who are given devices. They're not being monitored, they're just told, here, download what you want, use what you want, and go for it. And we're seeing a lot more that kids younger and younger are taking nude photos of themselves and sending it to someone else. And that does feed into our cyber tips, as I said before. But with this case specifically, what it showed is that not all screen time is equal. And we argue this as well. There is a way for kids to use devices that is safe, that is, conducive to their well-being. But on the flip side of that, it does place a huge emphasis on the connections that kids make within that cyber realm. Are they just talking to kids they know at school? Are they talking to other people? And so on. And it really reflects offline vulnerabilities that are then hugely emphasized in a digital world. So in the case of cyberbullying specifically, if a child is being cyberbullied, there's a high chance that they're also being bullied at school or in other social settings. So with parents, one thing that we stress pretty heavily are rules and boundaries. So it is important that as parents you establish, time limits, who your child can talk to on their device, what apps they're allowed to have on their device, and so on. And it's super important that also with establishing these rules and boundaries that you're checking that they're being followed. Because it's not enough to just say, I said so, you can't have this, because kids are very sneaky, they're curious, and if you don't, help to guide them through the situation, they're going to figure it out for themselves. And so with that also comes privacy settings. They're super important, they're amazing. Even if your child is being the safest digital citizen, having privacy settings is just one step better. So these are some examples of how to set up privacy settings on commonly used apps. So this is Instagram. If you go under settings, privacy, there's a little toggle at the top, and if you just switch that over, it switches your account to private. So when you first create social media accounts, they are automatically public. You have to physically go in and change it for it to be set to private. And with Instagram specifically, what it allows the user to do who has a private account, they can look who wants to follow them, they can kind of vet them by looking through their profile, and they can then decide from there if they want to be followed or not. Snapchat is slightly different than other apps in that a public setting is a geolocation. So if you have a public Snapchat account, your little Bitmoji icon is placed on a map, and all of your friends can see where you are in the world. Even it's high-tech enough to show if you're driving, if you're listening to music, and so on and so forth. So by switching your account to ghost mode, it essentially removes your little icon from that map. And this is kind of a new setting with ghost mode. So I was messing around with Snapchat one day, just trying to make sure that I'm staying up to date on how it works. And I had my account set to ghost mode turned off, so all of my friends could see my location. And what I found was that if you are friends with someone who also has ghost mode turned off, you can see where they traveled within a certain amount of time. So for example, my friend Ashley drove from Columbus to Parma about 10 hours ago, so we both have ghost mode turned off. I can see where she's been within the last day. And then my friend Maggie traveled from Palatine, Illinois to Summit, Wisconsin within a 24-hour period. So it's just another step closer to continuing to connect people in a way that may not necessarily be needed. So just another reason why Snapchat, your account should definitely be set to ghost mode instead of public. So with kids, especially nowadays, privacy is not always straightforward. I mean, we view it as very black and white. Don't share this information. It's personal, whether it's a password, your siblings' names, doesn't matter. It's personal information. It doesn't need to be put on the internet. However, with kids, it's a little more fluid. There's a huge emphasis placed on, I need the maximum amount of likes possible, or I need to have as many friends as possible on whatever application. So for them, privacy is very different than how we view it. So what we stress is when you are talking to your child about privacy, it's important to emphasize certain cases as to why that behavior is risky. It's not enough for you to just tell your kids, I said so, this is how it's going to be. Like, that does work, I'm not going to knock that, but kids tend to understand more if you tell them, this information does need to be online because of X, Y, Z. These are some common parental control apps that parents have said that they really like. I've heard a lot from, Bark? A lot of parents seem to like that one. A lot of these are really good at certain things. So for example, Life 360 tracks how fast you're going in a car, as well as location and so on. My only thing with these is that they are not a catch-all. So while they're really good at certain things, they're not going to catch every little thing on your child's device. They're a great tool, but they don't replace you talking with your child about topics and having those ongoing conversations. As well as that, kids are very sneaky, as I said before. They're going to find ways to circumnavigate these different apps. So along with having them, it's also important to explain, why they're on there, what you're doing to keep them safe, and so on. A story I have with Life 360 is that my mom required my brothers, who are a lot younger than I am, to have it on their device once they got it, and how they got around that was that they just left their device at home, and they would just go out and do whatever they wanted, and so on. So just a little anecdote to show you that kids are going to get around it, but that doesn't mean don't use them. So at the end of all of this, there's still the question is, how do I know what my kids are doing online? And for that, my honest answer is to talk to them. My story that goes along with this is that I had a mom in one of my presentations. She said she couldn't figure out Fortnite, no matter how hard she researched it. She tried to play it by herself. She's like, I couldn't figure it out. But her kids loved it. They wanted to be on it all the time. It was their favorite game. So what she did was she created a Friday night game night where her kids could play Fortnite, but she got to play with them. So with that, she got to see who they were interacting with, how the game worked, how you connected with other people, how the conversations went, and so on. So with that story, I just want to emphasize that it is more important than ever to have these active and ongoing conversations. With the speed at which technology is changing, with how fast kids are able to look at an app, figure out how it works, and use it correctly, it's so important that you as parents continue to talk with your kids. So I want to circle back to the content category of our cyber tips. Like I said before, as you can see, it's the largest category. And the reason that it continues to climb is not just because of what our offenders are trading amongst themselves, creating, saving, and so on. It also has to do with what kids are creating. So we don't have a sexting statute in the state of Ohio. So any case that involves a minor who is taking nude photos, sending it to another minor, another person, and so on, we do get cyber tips from those instances. So these are some statistics from kids ages 13 to 17 and how they viewed sexting, essentially. So 1 in 5 girls stated that they have shared their own nude image. 40% of teens argue that it's normal for people to send their own nude images, and so on. And for us, we continue to see this highlighted every single day. It happens in every high school. We get cases where school resource officers have reached out to us saying, you know, I had a group of kids who were sharing nude images, this is what happened, and so on. We get cyber tips as young as 5 and 6 of kids who are taking videos, taking pictures, and either posting it online, sending it to someone else, and so on. So sexting, that type of conversation is very similar to other types of conversations in terms of there's a number of reasons why it's not the right thing to do, obviously. As adults, we know this. As kids, there's a lot of pressure to conform, to be popular, and so on. So that's why they're continuing to engage in this type of behavior. However, for us, we're seeing that it's creating a whole new monster in terms of sextortion. So what sextortion is essentially when an adult poses online as someone they're not, it's typically a child, and they reach out to other real children. And what they do is, as posing as someone they're not, they say, you know, I will send you a nude image if you send me one in return. And this minor then sends them a nude image. And then from there, that adult says, okay, I have this picture of you. If you don't send me X amount of money or more pictures, I'm going to send this to everyone you know. And what they'll do is they will go on that child's social media account and they will search for their parent's name. Or if their parent has a social media account, they'll look for tagged pictures that their child has posted. Once they find those accounts, they will screenshot them and send them to the child, just to show that they're not messing around. We have seen this type of crime affect all age groups. On the national level, we see it largely affecting teen boys ages 14 to 17, a lot more than teen girls. However, in Ohio, it's 50-50 across the board. So about a year ago, or slightly over a year ago, in November of last year, we received a cyber tip from Instagram with what we believed it led to be a sextortion case. So with these cyber tips, we received that image on the left, but we also received the messages that went along with it. So these are some of the messages that I pulled out, and this is what our offender ended up sending to a 17-year-old boy on Instagram. So what our offender did was he posed online as a teen girl. He used pictures that were not sure where they came from. They could have been public material, maybe a past victim, maybe someone else. We have no idea. But he was using these images of this teen girl, and he reached out to this 17-year-old male and he said, hey, this is who I am. If you send me a nude video, I will send you one back. And once that teenager sent that video, this offender continued to send messages such as these. So he said, I want you to pay $6,000 for the total removal of this video. You're going to regret it. I'll ruin your life, and so on and so forth. This cyber tip, the whole conversation lasted for about 20 hours. The first part of the conversation, what up here, looked like this. So you're probably imagining, like, how can this conversation, 20 hours go by? Like, how does that teenager agree to send these photos? And that's because for the first 20 minutes, this suspect just continued to pose as this girl, saying things like small talk. How are you doing? I'm good. How are you? So on and so forth. So this small talk portion lasted for 20 minutes. That nude video was sent, and then for the next 19 and a half hours, this teenager was essentially bargaining with that price. So what these offenders will do is they'll start at something insanely high, like $6,000, $5,000, $10,000, whatever, and they will slowly work their way down. So with this, in this case specifically, our victim ended up paying about $100 in terms of a gift card, because that's all he had. He was a 17-year-old, he wasn't working, going to school, playing sports, and so on. So these offenders know that these kids don't have that type of money. So they're just hoping to get as much as possible from whoever it is they're talking to. So with sextortion, it has really kind of put the brakes on how we've been doing sexting education in schools. Because up until this point, it's been largely scare tactics. If you send this picture, you're going to get in trouble, it's illegal, it's a felony, so on and so forth. And unfortunately, that has created a huge mental health crisis. I mean, we've seen it across the United States. There have been a number of suicides that they've related to sextortion. There was an individual named James Woods out of Streetsboro who did commit suicide because of sextortion. Another individual out of Michigan, Jordan DeMay, exact same case, exact same thing. So it is a huge mental health crisis that now we have to change the education when it comes to sexting and sexting-related offenses. So the first thing, if your child comes to you and says, hey, this is happening, I don't know what to do, we can't continue to blame them. The amount of courage it takes for that kid to come forward in the first place is huge. So it's super important that if you are that person that they choose to tell, that you support them. Like, they know it was a mistake, they know they did a bad thing. So we need to cut that cycle of abuse, essentially. The second is to not continue talking to the offender. There's nothing that you can say, either as yourself, posing as your child, that's going to get them to stop. This is essentially their full-time job. They wake up, they talk to 10 different kids. If they get $100 from each kid, that's a paycheck for them. That's all they care about. So we really emphasize to just cease all communication with that suspect. Then screenshot the messages, screenshot the offender's profile, and so on, and then submit a cyber tip line report. Our cyber tips are a nationwide reporting system. So let's say, for example, that an individual in Ohio is being sextorted and they submit a cyber tip. We can corroborate that across all other states, all other 49 states. So that allows us to see if that same offender is exploiting a child in Alaska, in Illinois, so on and so forth. So this is the website for reporting a cyber tip. It's report.cybertip.org. It's essentially an online form. So you put in, what are you reporting, where did this incident occur, and then there's a description of what happened, so on and so forth. There is also like a phone number that you could call. However, they're both essentially the exact same thing. So either option is definitely viable. So documenting an incident is very similar to reporting instances of sextortion. Don't delete anything, don't retaliate, don't respond, don't conduct your own investigation. Please just hand all of that over to people who can investigate this crime. So making a detailed report with your local law enforcement, and then also filing a NECMEC cyber tip line report as well. If you're looking for more information in terms of conversation starters, topics to talk about with your kids, the National Center also puts out different resources, so if that is something you're interested in, their website is missingkids.org. These are some additional resources. I'm a big resource guy, so NetSmarts, iKeepSafe.org, GetNetWise.org. These are all websites that create different conversation starters for different age groups. I believe it's K through 12, so let's say you have a kindergartner and you want to talk to them about cyberbullying. You can definitely look into these things. Or let's say you have a 12th grader and you want to talk to them about sextortion. Also a great resource. If you're looking for more statistics, hard numbers on different types of crimes, whether it's sextortion, cyberbullying, enticement, these two websites, safekids.com, parents.thorn.org, they do yearly statistical reports on different categories. So if you're looking for more number things, these are definitely worth your while. We also try to stay updated as much as possible in terms of like what we tell parents and what we see in terms of our cases. So feel free to check us out as well. But does anyone have any questions before I keep going? I know that was a lot of information, and I really appreciate you bearing with me. I know it's a lot and I talk fast, but yeah, any questions at all? Anything I missed? Yes?
What happens when the board comes to what's the process investing? Is there a follow-up?
Yeah, absolutely. So for our system, when a cyber tip is made, or even a civilian report like they call us, it will go to one of our investigators immediately. So we have 4 special investigators. Once they receive that tip, they will look into it for personal identifiers. They'll run that IP address. If the individual did identify themselves saying, this is who I am, this happened to me, we do call that individual to check. It's essentially like a welfare check. And we do with sextortion cases, we tend to prioritize those a little bit because of how we've seen the suicides tending to happen with sextortion. So if we do have someone who's reported it and we get it, we do call that individual and we reach out to them. Any other questions? Okay. I will hang out for a little bit, but I want to say thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate your time. But yes, thank you so much and have a great night. Yeah, I can make it available, absolutely.
Yeah, we can have, go ahead. First, give a hand to Ms. Walter. Yes, the PowerPoint will be available, and also, like I said, we did tape it, so we will be showing it on our Elyria School District website, so you can watch it there as well. So yeah, so all that information is there. Again, I appreciate you all coming. She is willing to stay after a little bit if you want to have any personal questions or ask anything like that. Again, this is ever changing, and you know, it's always good to stay on top of everything. As a father of 3, I worry about it as well. And sometimes it is just sitting down and having those conversations with your kids. So thank you again for coming out. Thank you.